Hello everybody, welcome back to my channel on this glorious Friday afternoon. Well, Friday for me, Monday for you, or Tuesday. I don't know when this is going to go out. For this week's video, it's going to be another one that sort of uses old footage, and it's going to be another positive reinforcement video. I want to do a series where I show sort of how I taught different behaviors, different tricks, and I thought a fun one to start with would be how I taught Merlin to side pass at Liberty. A lot of these videos are from December and January. I'll sort of just show the footage and do a little voiceover about sort of what I did and how I taught it. Hopefully this will be a fairly short and sweet video, which for me will probably mean it's still 20-ish minutes long. But I thought I would also show a little bit of my training session with Merlin today because we're planning on backing him in anywhere from like 6 to 8 weeks from now. He's had a few weeks off. The last time I did anything substantial with him was my last barn vlog where I did some long lining and some lunging. So he's had a few weeks just to chill, come in and be groomed, and that's about it. And today I'm going to bring him in and we're going to go in the arena and do some lunging, but I'm going to try to put side reins on him for the first time. I know a lot of people have differing opinions on side reins. For Merlin, it's more going to be just for him to get used to the idea of contact. They're going to be so loose that he can put his head wherever he wants. Hi, you finally decided to join me. But yeah, so I'll pop that in at the end just as some little bonus clips. But I'm going to turn over to voiceover Caitlin now to go over some footage from training sessions in December and January. Okay, so before I get into the first step before side passing, I'm just going to show a few clips of what I will do like at the beginning of a session. So obviously I don't jump straight in to trying to teach him a new behavior. I start with things that he's familiar with, which in this case is targeting and following a moving target. It's something he really enjoys, so it's a great place to start. So the first thing to know about any type of horse training, not just positive reinforcement, is that you want to break down the goal behavior or goal movement or whatever into the smallest possible pieces. So for side passing, I decided that because his body needs to move sideways towards me, I would start with teaching him how to hip target, which is basically holding out your hand and teaching him to target his hip to your hand, which most times would require sideways movement of the hip towards your hand. So to begin to teach the cue for hip targeting, I stood at his side, sort of right next to his barrel, held out my hand, touched his hip, clucked, and then gave him a treat. Because he had never done anything like this before, I thought that the easiest way to teach him would be to do it this way so that he associates the touch of my hand to his hip with the cue, which is hip. And after about 12 or 13 repetitions of doing that, I start to up the ante a little bit and hold my hand out about 2 or 3 inches away from his hip and see what happens. Merlin is at the point in his positive reinforcement training where he has learned that I will allow him to problem solve, and as you can see in the clips coming up, he very quickly realizes that sideways movement to touch my hand there. So you see that first step there was the first time that he had shown any sort of movement towards my hand, and I praised the absolute crap out of him because even though it wasn't the target behavior, which was more movement sideways, like more of an extended movement sideways, it was still a small step towards what I wanted, and there again he stepped towards my hand, so he got a treat and a big fuss. I've learned over the last few months that praise for Merlin can be as strong of a reinforcer as the alfalfa pellets or as a nice good scratch. And as you can see, after that first time that I praised the crap out of him, he got the behavior within a couple seconds. The next 2 times that I asked him to do it, and then he had one effort here where he didn't quite know what I was asking, and then I let him have a think about it, let him problem solve, and he did the best offer yet. And as you can see, less than 10 minutes after I started trying to teach him this behavior, he had the basics down pat, and it actually blew my mind how quick he learned it. So basically, after he had offered me those few really good efforts, I decided to end the training session there. So this is a few days later. In between that first session and this one, I want to say I did 1 or 2 shorter sessions that were maybe 3 or 4 minutes long focused solely on hip targeting, and that really helped him to hone the skill. And as you can see in the clips from the beginning of this training session, he pretty much has it down pat. And I've started to raise the criteria a little bit by asking for a couple of steps. You can see here that when I'm asking for the hip targeting, I'm not just holding my hand out, but I've also started wiggling my fingers. This will be important for later. So once hip targeting was taught, the next thing that I wanted to teach him was shoulder targeting, because the idea that I had was if I could teach him a cue for hip targeting, a cue for shoulder targeting, then eventually I would be able to combine those two cues together to result in a different cue for side passing, because both would involve moving one end of the body sideways. So I started to teach shoulder targeting in the same way that I started to teach hip targeting, which is to say the cue, which for me is shoulder, then to touch his shoulder, click, and then treat, so that he associates the cue with his shoulder touching my hand and then receiving a treat. Now, something I will say is that he caught on to hip targeting much quicker than he caught on to shoulder targeting. Just for full transparency, he started to do the side pass before he had actually learned shoulder targeting in full. It's something that he still finds tricky. I'm not exactly sure why. It might have something to do with the fact that he finds the balance of his hind end a little easier than the balance of his front end, because there's so much more weight on the front end. So at this point it had been a few minutes and he hadn't offered me any movement, but as you can see here, this is the first time that I gave the cue and that he actually moved his shoulder towards me. It was barely any movement, but I rewarded the heck out of it because it was a first step towards what I wanted.
Good job, baby!
And once again, after one time giving me the slightest movement and receiving a heck of a lot of praise, he did it even better the second time. So flash forward a few weeks, I went home for Christmas, so he had a few weeks off. So this is his first session back after the previous session where he had sort of perfected his hip targeting and had started to learn shoulder targeting. I think prior to this, I just didn't include the footage. I had worked on some other behaviors a little bit, and now I'm just reviewing shoulder targeting. Something interesting that happens here is that Merlin offers me a behavior, which in this case is hip targeting, that I didn't ask for. And I've found that this is something that horses will do when they're confused about what you're asking them to do. They'll offer you a behavior that has been heavily reinforced in the past. And I'm including this footage just to show you that even though it looks like Merlin has picked up, you know, the behavior super quickly, we still have miscommunications. He gets confused and we have to work through it. But I also find these moments to be some of the best teaching moments because it allows him the chance to really work on his problem solving skills, and it gives me the opportunity to really rethink and think about, maybe, is there another way I could ask this, or is anything I'm doing confusing to him? And as you can see, we very quickly work through it and get to a point where he's offering me the behavior that I'm asking him for. So here we're finally getting to the shoulder targeting, and because he was confused about it the time before, I didn't start with super high stakes. I started again just by loading the cue, and it really seemed to help him understand it. You know, he had only done it once before and really only offered me those 2 tiny steps, so I knew I had to bring it back to basics.
Good job!
And as you can see, very quickly, probably within a minute, he offers me his best attempt at a shoulder target yet, and he gets lots and lots of fuss and praise, and then he actually spooked at something, so I just reinforced him staying with me, clicking and treating.
Shoulder, you can do it! Good!
And a common theme in this video is that Merlin loves praise, so he continued to offer me some really good efforts, and I was super happy. This was the point where I felt that he really started to get it. So I decided to throw caution to the wind and up the ante a little bit and just combine the hand signals for hip and shoulder targeting to see what would happen. As you can see, he starts to move his hip towards me and then gives a tiny step with his front leg too, which is just absolutely crazy. And as you can see here, he goes sideways, not fully sideways, he's sort of going forward and sideways, but I didn't even care. When you're first training a new behavior, you want them to get the general idea, and then once they have that, you can start fine-tuning it a little bit. And as you can see, he was getting a little confused, so that told me that I was asking too much, so I just went back to basics and started doing shoulder targeting again. And in there somewhere, some snow fell off the roof or something, and he spooked, and I just decided to leave this in because this goes to show what positive effect positive reinforcement has, because rather than taking off like he used to, he comes back to me very quickly and looks for reassurance. So this is the moment of his first true attempt at a side pass. I was asking for shoulder targeting, and then he started to move his hip sideways, so I just raised both of my hands and he sort of did it. Again, lots of praise results in him giving an even better attempt, and I was just so pleased. He was being such a good boy and was just kind of blowing me away with how incredibly smart he was. And after that first attempt that he offered me, it's just all about repetition, so I'm just going to let the following clips play and enjoy watching my boy be super smart. So much like with hip targeting, I did a few very short, 2 or 3 minute sessions in between the last session and this one. There's about 3 weeks in between these sessions, but I didn't go out to the barn as much and didn't have as much time. And as you can see, he pretty much has it. He's going sideways, he's doing 7 or 8 steps, we've built duration, and he's just doing really well. And I just realized that I haven't really talked about what my cue is for the side passing, so it's basically the hand signals for shoulder and hip targeting combined without a verbal cue. It's just the hand gestures, and he seemed to pick it up really quickly. So I basically just hold my hands up and wiggle my fingers, and that has become the cue for side passing. Now it's obvious that this is not a perfect side pass. There's some really nice steps, but there are moments when his hip leads or his shoulder leads, but it's just going to come with time and practice. And as you can see, this is a difference between the last clips and these ones of 3 or 4 sessions. I haven't done that much side passing with him in the last couple of months, but when we start up again, I'm sure that he will progress as quickly as he has in the past. So yeah, that is my very rambly discussion of how I taught my horse how to side pass at Liberty. Just to give you guys an idea of what I'm dealing with, he's just a swamp monster. So we're in the arena. He's got his surcingle with side reins attached. I don't even know if I'm going to attach them today. I just want them to sort of hang by his sides. And he's got his beautiful Harlow Lux bridle from Milestone Equestrian, and he looks so handsome. So I'm gonna get him on the lunge before he continues to get bored. He is a bit mouthy with the bit, but I don't care because he hasn't worn a bit in a while and he's a baby, so I really don't care.
Silhouettes in the neon lights, see my reflection in your eyes. Maybe it's love.
little bit of our session. I didn't think I was going to put the side reins on because he was being very silly. He's never been like that on the lunge, but the paddocks are really mucky right now, so they can't really move that much. So it's understandable that he's a little happy, but he's being super good. He does like to drop his head a little too much, so that'll be something that I'll have to battle against.
It's just a day, just a day, just a day away. In the way.
As you can see, they're super loose. Just sort of introducing him to the idea of contact. I'm not doing too much. He's only been on the lunge about maybe 10 minutes combined, and he's quite, I mean, it's quite warm today and he still has a big winter coat, so he is sweating. This is more about introducing him to the idea of contact rather than fitness, because he does move around a decent amount outside. And so yeah, I'm gonna walk a bit more and we'll call it a day.